Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel. My name is Maureen O'Connor from Quilters Heaven in Northbrook, Illinois, and I am the Opinionated Quilter. Today's episode, number 85, continues on from last week. Last week we talked about resizing quilt blocks, but we did not cover quilts that are made from strip pieced units. I resize these all the time. The patterns are often written with bigger strips than I like to use. I much prefer smaller. So let's get right to it. I have here my sunshine and shadows that we used in the episode that showed how to choose your fabrics. Now, I love how this came together. It may not be your cup of tea. It's a little wild. So what I've learned over the years is everybody likes something different. So you have to pick the fabrics that you like. And with the help of Linda, picked these fabrics and I absolutely love it. But this is a great example of resizing. This pattern was originally written for cutting 3-inch strips to finish to 2.5. I like smaller, like I said, so I cut 2 to finish to 1.5. Well, that's an inch difference in every single one of these squares. So that really makes a much smaller quilt. So many times when I do this, I end up making it smaller first and then making it bigger. So how do we do this? Like I said, the pattern has you cut strips 3 to finish to 2.5. This quilt in the pattern is 77.5 by 92. When I cut my strips at 2 to finish to 1.5, I get a 46.5 by 55.5 inch quilt, which is a nice smaller lap size quilt. It could stay this size if you wanted it to, but I decided I wanted to make mine bigger. I have here the math of how I got to the 46.5 and how I got to the 55.5. But many of you would not be interested in that, so I'm not going to go through it, but it's here if you want to look at it. So if you recall, when we did the choosing of the fabric for this quilt, I showed you how I take a file folder and I make a guide of what fabric is what, and I write down all the details on it. And even though the fabrics are in my shop, I still do this, but it's highly recommended for you when you're doing it at home, because when you're changing sizes of these things and making more units, you sometimes don't guess the fabric requirement exactly correct. So you want to know exactly what you bought so that if you need to get more of it, you know what you need to ask for. So the other thing I always do is I make copies of the pattern so I don't have to cart around the book. I make a copy of the pattern and I put the book back on my shelf so when I need it I can find it. I also put them in page protectors. I took it out of the page protector because the plastic causes glare on the camera. But here is the page that I'm most interested in for this pattern. And I don't think I said on the onset here, I said it when we picked the fabric. It's from Traditions with a Twist. It's no longer available. You can find it on Amazon. Last time I checked, I think there were more than 10 buying options for it. So if you like strip piece quilts and you haven't picked up this book, I would do so. But anyways, this is the page, and this spells out the strip sets. An earlier page tells me what strip sets I need to make, and the quilt is made up of 3 strip sets, a 1, a 2, and a 3. The 3 is the center one. You only make one number 3 strip set. You make, well, the way the pattern is written, 4 number 1s and 4 number 2s. So I wanted to make those wider. So different than when you're resizing just blocks, where you change the size of the units of the block to make the size you want to, either increasing or decreasing. In this case, when you're making it bigger, you have to keep the sequence of the strip sets in order. So how do I do that? I actually just take a piece of paper and I write down the letters in the order that they are here. Sometimes I might skip a little bit of the middle, and because of space limitations, I had to skip middle to show you on the board. But I write out the sequence of the strip sets, and in the pattern, the number 1 started with G and went through to here to the F. We have a whole section in the center, and then it continues on, and if you look, it's exact opposite. F, E, D, and so on to G. So G is on the outside in both. So I decided that I was going to add 6 units on each side. So if I refer to my sheet, what unit comes before G so that I can keep this in the same order? Well, it's F. So in front of G, I have to put A, B, C, D, E, F. So this section would be up here. And then the same, but opposite, goes on to here. So after G is F through A. So this keeps the exact same sequence as the original strip set. What was I going to say? I don't remember. Oh, yes. So A and A is at the end. Exactly like G and G was at the end in the original. So I added 12 squares to each strip set. So that gives me 18 more inches. So now my quilt measures 55 and a half by 64 and a half. So I'm not sure if I'm going to do more units 1 and 2. What I did here, while this quilt was constructed this way, these are my strip sets vertically across. I could decide to add 2 more unit 1s and 2 more unit 2s. That would give me 24 more inches in length. So right now I have made my width, my length, and vice versa. So that is how you go ahead and resize a strip pieced quilt. You have to remember to keep your pieces in sequence. That's the most important thing. Now, I want to show you the Boston Commons. Give me 1 second while we move out the board. We've done 3 episodes on Boston Commons, and we will have those links in the description box. Here are 2 versions. Basically, I showed you 2 different ways to make the Boston Commons, and they are all strip pieced. So this falls under the same category of how to resize the quilt. Now, this one, and I folded back these lovely borders just so that they could fit to pin up here so you could see them. But this was the first version I showed you where it was a twofer. You made your strip sets, and whatever you pulled off of this one, you put into another quilt. So from your strip sets, you would get 2, and they would be opposite. This one has pink here in the center. When you pull it off, you get pink here on the outside and all the way through. That it would still be the orange next to the pink, and then blue, and so on and so forth. This is clearly a tiny one. If you wanted to make a bigger one, you would just cut bigger strips. But the same principle applies where you have to keep your sequence the same. Now, an easier one to see it on is this one. And this is the one I called my fast Boston Commons, or my charity version Boston Commons, because it works up so fast with the big squares. So the strip set here, I'm not sure if you can see it right just quickly by looking at it, but the strip set is from the blue to the blue. So it has fabric 1, 2, 3, green is the center, 3, 2, 1, and that's all the strip set was. And so my center strips got a green put in the center, and that's just one strip set. And from here on up is one strip set. So it only used 2 strip sets. So if you change the size on these and you don't want it, you just change the size of the strips cut, then you don't have to do anything else. But let's say you want to make it a little smaller without changing the size of the strip set. How would you do that? Well, that's again the whole sequence issue. You could, if you wanted to, delete one of the fabrics. You could say, I'm going to skip this purple, and it would go 1, 2, 3, 2, 1. That's always the key, is keeping the sequence. And now another issue is you have to have the same number of blocks of squares on either side of the center. So if you decide to make more or less units here, you have to do the same. You can't put 2 strip sets on one side and 1 strip set on the other side. Your quilt would be lopsided. So you could, for instance, do a repeat of just green and pink down here, and then the same up here. And that would keep your sequence the same. So what I would recommend you do is to draw it out on paper and make sure that you keep everything the same from the center. And I don't know if you remember in this version where we here took what we pulled off and put it in another quilt. In these, what you take off from going from this strip to this strip, the pieces you pull off come up to the corner here and work your way down. We'll have those links. It may not make sense to you as I'm saying it now, but if you rewatch that video, you'll see exactly what I'm talking about. But I was saying before I got distracted that you should draw it out on paper, or if you have EQ or some other quilt software, you can put it in there and draw it out super fast, super easy. So I hope this helps if you want to change the size of a strip piece quilt. I do it all the time. It's not hard. It may have seemed like it for a little bit, but I promise you, give it a try. It's easy. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Please like, share, and subscribe. And until next time, happy sewing.